Months after the flood, Huey Long is running for governor. His campaign is against, quote, the plutocrats, the self-appointed rulers of the state, unquote. Everybody knows who he means. He's talking about the New Orleans bankers, really, and the big oil companies. And naturally, he's elected.
Huey Pierce Long had run for governor once before and failed. But more and more, ordinary people in Louisiana were losing patience with the so-called government by gentlemen. Huey Long seized upon the people's discontent and ignited it with scorching oratory.
The people not only give up their property year after year, but they go further and further and further into economic slavery.
And yet no aristocrat ever ruled Louisiana with such absolute power as Huey Long would.
My mother used to say, now when we had the lights turned off because we couldn't pay the utility bills, I'm going to call Senator Long about this. Now she never could, you understand, and never did, but she still had within her breast the feeling that there was somebody who cared, and that if she called Mr. Long would make things right.
As I traveled around Louisiana, particularly out in the rural areas, I would go in many homes and there'd be a picture of the Lord, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, on the mantle, and there'd be another picture of Huey Long. And many people idolized Huey Long. And it was a question of, he was their hero.
Huey Long was born on August 30th, 1893. He often talked of his poor upbringing among the red clay hills near Winfield, claiming that, like Abraham Lincoln, he had been born and raised in a log cabin. In fact, his family was one of the largest landholders in Wynn Parish. But unlike the wealthy elite he would topple from power, Huey didn't owe his success to any particular privilege or economic advantage.
He had a magnetic personality, he had a superior intelligence. Huey Long was the kind of man with a photographic memory. He never forgot anybody he ever met or any fact he ever knew. And Huey Long was also the kind of individual that people instinctively would move out of the way to let him by. He wouldn't move out of your way.
Although Huey Long was a voracious reader, he was too impatient for a conventional education. Expelled from high school, he eventually enrolled in Tulane University's law program. Huey had studied only a year when he arranged for a special bar exam just for himself.
They gave it, he passed, and thus he became a lawyer without ever having obtained a high school diploma, a college diploma, or a law school diploma.
Huey Long had much loftier ambitions than just the practice of law, however.
When he first married Rose McConnell, he told her that one day I'm going to be President of the United States.
Being just 24 years old, though, the only statewide office he was eligible for was a seat on the Railroad Commission, which regulated public utilities at the time. It may have been an unremarkable job, but Huey Long used it to do remarkable things, and quickly he gained notoriety.
The people of Louisiana would know that Huey Long was championing their causes by attacking the big corporations that were gouging the people with high gas and oil prices.
Having worked for a while as a successful traveling salesman, Huey pitched just as convincingly to his constituents as he had to his customers.
My father used to tell me about Huey coming to the Rapides drug companies to sell merchandise and patent medicines to my dad. And that's the first time I heard anyone use the phrase that he's a heck of a salesman, because he could sell a refrigerator to an Eskimo.
When he ran for governor in 1927, Huey sold the people of Louisiana promises of better roads and bridges, hospitals, schools, and especially free textbooks for children.
I grew up in a very poor family. When I was in grammar school, my father told us we couldn't go to school the next year because he couldn't afford the school books. That was the year that Huey Long put in free school books in the public education system. and consequently I give Huey Long a great deal of credit for whatever I became in life.
When Long took office as governor at the age of 34, there were fewer than 300 miles of paved roads in the entire state. When his term ended, he had stretched them to nearly 1,600 miles. Those smooth, straight roads became emblematic of Huey's new Louisiana, now on the move and no longer spinning its wheels in the muck of the past. To the populous governor, going forward meant rolling over the rich and powerful. Humiliated by the upstart governor, Louisiana's powerful ruling class struck back quickly and hard.
My grandfather was Walter Burke, and he was a president of the Louisiana Senate during Huey's impeachment trial. Huey did some pretty unconscionable things. He'd send the state police to a newspaper, just bust it up. They'd break the presses up, if he didn't like something that was in the paper. It's fair to say he was a dictator. But the night before his impeachment trial, the state police, I guess, went to the homes of a number of the witnesses, and they were threatened. They didn't do it to my grandfather, but he was one of the few who would testify.
The proceedings turned rather ugly. The governor's younger brother, Earl, reportedly bit one of Huey's critics, but in the end, Long survived the political assaults and emerged more powerful than ever.
Every man a king.
Huey Long may have promised every man a king, but it was clear enough who wore the crown.
With every man a king. What do you think about that? I think it's fine.
Soon, Huey would become a familiar voice to listeners around the country.
We didn't have television in those days, and radio was very prominent. Huey Long would come on radio and he'd say, "Now this is Huey Long, and I'm going to play some music, and I want you to get on the telephone and call your friends and tell them that I'm on. And I'm going to give you about 10 or 15 minutes to do that. And you'd be amazed at the number of people, my dad included, that would immediately get up and get on the telephone and start calling his friends, and other people would call their friends to tell them to get on to turn on the radio and listen to Huey Long."
Huey Long was poised to spread his message well beyond the borders of Louisiana and appeal to Americans everywhere. The message was now, share our wealth.
We expect to see the 48 states of America and the United States fall in line with Louisiana's Share Our Wealth program. That will mean that there'll be no such thing as a man without a home and something to eat and something to wear and a job. If you allow a big man to have billions, then all of us can't have anything else. So we propose that none shall be bigger than a 10 millionaire, and none shall own less than a home and the comforts necessary for a home, and property to educate their children.
The entire federal government would run on the basis of these confiscations from millionaires. There wasn't nearly enough money in the country to do that. Huey Long was playing a shell game. Whether he believed it or not, if he did believe it, he was awfully naive. If he didn't believe it, he was a charlatan.
Huey quickly lost patience with President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal. His call for change was capturing the attention of voters around the country and worrying the White House.
Either one of them, and we've got to have a candidate away from the Republican Party and away from the Democratic Party. I, for one, am perfectly willing to see that there's another choice in the United States in 1936.
I personally believe that Huey ushered in a lot of these reforms, not only for Louisiana, but for the nation. We're talking about minimum wage. We're talking about the 40-hour week. But he pressured Roosevelt to do those things.
Back home in Louisiana, he continued to crush anyone who opposed him. One of the enemies punished by Long was Judge Benjamin Pavey of St. Landry Parish. His son-in-law was Dr. Carl Weiss. On a muggy night in September 1935, Weiss came to the state capitol and confronted the senator. Exactly what happened next remains in doubt even to this day.
In those days, you got the news by an extra, and I remember hearing this boy holler, "Extra, extra, extra, here Long's been shot."
According to the conventional theories, Dr. Carl Weiss shot Long. The senator's bodyguards then drew their weapons and gunned down his attacker, riddling Weiss's body with more than 50 bullet holes. But there's also good reason to doubt that version of events.
Much of the evidence in the assassination, such as the bullets, have disappeared. Huey Long's clothing that he wore has disappeared. There's a great deal of controversy and question as to whether Dr. Weiss did it all by himself or whether there was a conspiracy and whether the bodyguards struck Huey Long.
But while Huey's death came as a shock to the nation, it was hardly a surprise.
Anytime you would be discussing politics, invariably somebody would say, somebody needs to wipe him out, somebody needs to get rid of him, he's just a dictator, somebody's got to do something. But really, I heard that more than once.
In a great measure, Huey Long shot Huey Long, because Huey Long, with his vindictiveness, he engendered a climate of hostility that caused this state to be an armed camp.
For all those who may have hated Huey Long, however, there were a great many more among the poor and dispossessed who regarded him as a hero.
Never in its history has the South seen such crowds. More than 80,000 filed solemnly past his bier, many visibly affected.
When you understand that he was elected to the United States Senate in 1930, he took his seat in 1932, he was killed in 1935. He had 3 years, essentially, in the national arena. And during that 3 years, he became one of the most photographed, one of the most discussed people in the country.